Hey, what's up, comrades? I just finished The Heir, which is the fourth book in the selection series, and it is both. No, it's bad, but in a different way than the first three books. So, The Heir focuses on Idolin, I think is her name, who is the daughter of Maxon in America, but like 20 years later. So she's the princess, and she has a twin brother who's slightly younger than her, which she talks about all the time. Not the fact that she has a twin brother, which she also talks about all the time. But she talks about being slightly older, which makes her the heir, and she's going to be like the first queen of Ilia ever. And she is not well loved. Which is not like it's. I feel like it's supposed to be like a revealing surprise at the end of the book, but the whole time, every interaction with her is and it's from her point of view. But you're like, man, this chick's a bitch. Like at no point in reading this did I sympathize with her at all. Now, I do like it's it's more interesting in the romantic aspect. So in the first three books, obviously America was going to end up with Maxon, and Aspen was just like to cause drama, right? He just existed. Under no circumstance were they going to end up together. Like, if you read that and had any inklings that that might happen, welcome to reading books, I guess. If this is like your first book you've ever read, or your first whatever, that's fine. I don't feel bad. But if you've ever read like a book with romance in it before, or like a love triangle, then like I don't know what to tell you. This is how it works. Good times. So with her, there's like several suitors. Let's see if I can remember their names. There's Henry, I want to say, who's not really a member of the selection. Oh, so there's not rebels, but there's a lot of like people who are upset and want to overthrow the monarchy, but like in a peaceful manner. They just want to get rid of it because they feel like they're not getting treated well enough. And then we come to find out, because everyone is clued in on this except Idolin or Edie, um, is because she's completely unlikable. And so, in like the nicest way possible, her dad like comes up, King Maxon comes up with this idea because the caste system's gone now because it's like 20 years later, so it's completely gone. So people can do whatever they want, but then people are still kind of holding on to vestiges because it's not even been like a full generation of people, right? So that's pretty obvious. Some people would be holding on to this thing, but we come to find out. I mean, this is all revealed in like a letter her twin brother gives her before he goes off and marries like the French princess, which sounds like much more dramatic than it is, and much more. And the book tries to portray it as much more dramatic than it is because he was gonna like always marry this chick at some point. From like the very beginning of the book, it's like she describes how he's like supposed to marry this French princess for the thing, but they're also like completely in love with each other. So like it's like an inevitable situation, and then she kind of gives him like an ultimatum at some point, and he's like, "Cool, cool, cool, deuces," and just fucking elopes and leaves for France. Anyway, so but he leaves her this letter explaining the situation at the very end of the book, and telling her essentially like, hey, I don't know if you noticed, but people dislike you because you have a bad personality, and people are concerned that you're just going to be a terrible queen because you're very like stuck up. And even like her maid kind of points it out at some point, and she gets like some inklings of it or whatever, but it's super obvious from our like godlike perception of the reality, our big brains. And but he reveals all this stuff, and that's why the people are like more uppity about getting rid of the monarchy, because like they like King Maxon, he's doing fine, but they're like worried about her taking over, and so like, can we get rid of this before she takes over and like ruins everything for everyone? And then okay, yeah, so that's like, so the story if you can call it that. I'm all over the place because I don't know, man. There's not much to talk about. This is another one of those books, like the rest of these books, where like nothing happens. Like it introduces you to like the concept, and then there's like you fall asleep, and then you wake up, and there's like a letter at the very end that explains like everything, but nothing's like it's not like it sums it up in case you missed it, or tries to give you like, hey, just in case you weren't tracking, this is like kind of what everything that's been going on. It's like nothing, 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 nothing. Here's everything that's going on. Bookends. And you're like, oh, okay. So what's all the bullshit that happens in between? It's the selection, but for her. And like I said, she has several love interests. There's this guy, I don't know his name. He's supposed to be Finnish or something, and he can't speak English real good, but he's very charming, and he's good in the kitchen, and he likes people, and he's completely madly in love with her. Then there's Kyle, I want to say, who is Marley's son, who's the same age as Idolin. And Marley, if you remember, was the girl who was like best friends with America in the previous book, who got like caned because she was like hooking up with that guy behind everyone's back. Well, I mean, everything's forgiven now, and they're all living in the palace together, and her kids are being raised essentially like nieces and nephews of America. We actually don't get a lot of America in this. We get a lot more Prince Maxon just doing king stuff, and then Idolin like learning how to do king stuff. America like shows up, says a couple words here and there, and then disappears. And then, oh yeah, the dramatic finale that is like the cliffhanger is that she has a heart attack and is in the hospital when she finds out that the twin son, Aaron, I want to say, eloped. And everyone's like, and that's where the book ends, right? So, okay, so there's the Finnish guy. There's Harry, I think it's Henry. Henry is not in the selection, but he's like the interpreter for the Finnish guy. Because he's also Finnish, and he's also very sweet and nice and like fun. And then there's Kyle, who Idolin hates for like 15 seconds before she's in, makes out with him for like no obvious reason that I could really tell. And then after she makes out with him, it's like then making out is like game on, and then she like discovers a whole like appreciation for him as like a human being, besides just making out with him or something. So that's a story. Then there's Ian, I want to say, and Ian is my favorite character because Idolin clearly doesn't want to do the selection. She's just doing it to like appease the masses and to like distract people from like their sorrows, I guess. Give them like a show. It's like the bread and circus situation. And she doesn't want to marry anybody. She's like 18. She doesn't think she's going to fall in love. And then Ian comes along and is like, hey, you're like a strong, independent woman type. And I just want to be like the prince consort and like fuck around and do whatever. And like, I'm going to leave you alone and you can do whatever. And like, I know how to act and I'm handsome. So we should just get married and like call it good. And she's like, I'm not opposed to this idea. So that's one of the options. And then there's like various other jerk offs. There's this Fox guy who kind of like, he like defends her honor at some point because somebody says something or does something, and then he almost gets kicked out because you're not supposed to fight as part of the selection. We don't get a rehashing of the rules. We're just supposed to remember from the first book what like the rules are, but the rules have not changed. So one of them is no attacking anybody, even if you're defending yourself, it seems like, because this guy gets like really uppity and it like throws something at her and hits her with something, and then Fox like fights him. And then they almost kick him out too, and it's because he put his hands on another selected. It's like, bro, he was defending the like queen, essentially, like the heir apparent of this kingdom. Like, I mean, they don't kick him out. He seems like a sweetheart, but he's not really like a focus of like her love interest. It's really like the Finnish guy's interpreter, Kyle, this Ian guy. I feel like there's one more. Oh yeah, there's a guy who like wants to be a tailor, and he comes from like a poorer class, and that's like it. And then there's like this music guy who's a real turd, but he's not there very long. And then I think that's pretty much it. There's a bunch of randos. So she just goes on like the bachelorette style dates with these various guys, like very reticently. And they have some fun group dates where they play like baseball or they have a talent show. It's just a Bachelor. And it's fine. But like at the end of the book, I'm no close. It's like pretty early on it establishes that like these like five guys one of them's gonna be the king. And then by the end of the book, you are no closer. She has not whittled it down at all. She has barely whittled it. She showed up, there were like 32 people. She kicked out like 10 immediately. And then she kicked out like 2 or 3 more. And then one guy just like stormed off because she was like busy and couldn't go on a date with him. And then he like talked about how she's a bitch to like the newspapers, which she is. But it's like, come on, bro. Like, get the fuck over yourself. And then, yeah, that was it. And then America had a heart attack and the story ends. Oh, so the real fucking, like, she's a cunt. Is so she's got 3 younger brothers, right? And she just abuses them for like their loves. She's like in an abusive relationship with like everyone around her. Except some of these guys that she's trying to date. Like she doesn't treat any of them very well, and she's very like demands like attention and like whatever. Oh, we find out that America's younger sister Mia or whatever, she became a real trollop. So good for her, I guess. And then her other sister died of like a heart condition, which is important because at some point, and here, this is like details for details' sake, for no reason. Like if you're a mom in her 40s and your oldest son like goes to elope without telling anybody, and you have like a heart attack, it's reasonable. I don't think you need to explain further. You can just be like, okay, especially when I think, but yeah, so it's like, whatever. But at some point there's like a brief mention that like her older sister died a little young from like a heart attack or heart-related issues. And that's the thing. I'm assuming that because I don't remember them saying it was a heart-related issue specifically, but they could have, and I just wasn't paying attention. Fair. So I'm just going to assume that the writer at least accounted for that. But it was like, it's unnecessary, and it's unnecessary. She could have just had like, she could have just fainted and hit her head, or she could have just like fainted and they're like, we think it's a heart-related thing. That's weird. She doesn't have anything in her family with heart-related conditions. And that could have just been it. Like there's no reason to have brought this whole other thing up with like the aunt, right? Especially because none of her kids show up. It's like briefly mentioned. I don't think they ever mention the brother, the older or the younger. They might mention the younger brother, but it's really just like the younger sister that was predominant that was like her best friend from the first book, and then they like mentioned this other sister, which was in there. They mentioned the mom. I think she's still around and alive, but they don't really. But again, they don't really get into it at all. And then they don't mention like Maxon's whole family, right? Because he had an aunt who was like in the first or in the second book, I think, for a minute with a bunch of kids, and then it's like, whatever. They talk very highly of the Italians several times, which is cute, I guess. Because they kind of played a role in the first trilogy of books, but they also did not play a role at all, because they would have played a role if they had forced like the king's hand and like allowing her to like exist, and he was like in this series and so curmudgeonly about it, even though his son like took over the role. Because I mean, there's like so much stuff you could have done with it, but it's like if you had taken the Italian princess and her homies like out of the first 3 books, it would have done nothing. It's against one of these things where it's like stuff's brought up and there's no reason for it. It's just like exists to exist. It doesn't like develop characters. It doesn't really do anything. Like the Italians love America because they love America because she's the bestest in the whole world. Like that's not character development. It doesn't tell me anything. It's just kind of like, cool. It's another group of like random people who are like, oh, she's the best. We want her to be the queen. And then they get their wish at the end and then it's like dropped completely. So whatever. But yeah, as you can see, I'm talking about the first series of books quite a bit, because, so shockingly, I guess, or not shockingly, like it seems like even less stuff happens in this book than in any of the first books. I mean, aside from the lead, like nothing happens in that. But this is that level. Like I couldn't possibly argue that like there's more important things that happen here, or like anything really more happens that you really need to know, or like. Like again, it's like you get introduced to like the concept of what's going on in the world, and then it's like then there's the selection, and then by the end of the book, like nothing has after that initial. You get like the reveal at the end when the brother leaves, and that's exciting, and then America has a heart attack, which is also kind of exciting, and that's it. There's like nothing else nothing else really happens, and it's like what was the point of the rest of those? Like, okay, so she didn't really eliminate anybody, right? That like the main characters, like. Are the main characters. Like they kind of like existed and then they existed some more and then she didn't really narrow them down at all. So, and nothing, I mean, yeah, it's like got more lazy in the writing. Anyway, there's one more book, so we'll see where that comes. But yeah, cool. Catch y'all later.